Welcome back. Let's take a look at some business news now. Here's Bisi Adebayo.
Welcome to Business News. Nigeria's headline inflation climbed to 11.4% last month, showing a modest advance from 11.37%. However, the figure was much broader on a month-on-month basis at 1.11%, stronger than 0.94% reported in April. A new set of statistics released today reveals food sub index climbed to 11.14 in May from 1.14%, while core sub index weakened to 9% last month from 9.3% on a year-on-year basis, but higher by 0.75% when measured on a monthly basis. The NBS further reports inflation in cities and townships up to 1.15%, while rural index was stronger to 1.07% over the levels posted in April. Across Nigeria, 3 states recorded the strongest all-item inflation. Kebbi came first at 15.76%, Bauchi was second at 14.97%, and Kaduna at 13.74%. The Central Bank of Nigeria is reiterating its stand against the abuse of Naira notes with a clampdown on persons or groups found spraying money at events while trampling or squeezing the currency. The director of the Corporate Communications Department at the CBN, Mr. Isaac Okorafor, made this announcement at an interactive session with stakeholders in Owerri, the Imo State capital. Mr. Okorafor also mentioned that Nigerians can now visit their banks to exchange mutilated or old notes for new ones, following a CBN directive to all banks in the country to exchange old for new notes within the period of 3 months. In company news now, Dangote Cement has announced plans to expand its operations across Africa that should produce about 8 million tons of cement for export. The chairman of Dangote Cement PLC, Aliko Dangote, hinted that the company will also approve a dividend payment of 16 Naira 50 kobo per share.
The shareholders are here to get the news on their investment.
On my right is Edward Louis.
The company says 2018 was a good year, and they have the figures to show for it.
As at December 20,
with 7.4% growth in group cement sales and 11.9% growth in revenue, Dangote Cement PLC says it is delivering strong and sustainable returns for its shareholders.
We will now move to item number 1 on the agenda.
The board proposes a dividend of 16 Naira per ordinary 50 kobo share, up 52.4% on the dividend for 2017.
Mr. Chairman, so looked at the corporate governance. I've looked at one very important thing, sustainability report, which gives us a future. I am so happy with that.
The chairman, Aliko Dangote, speaks on the expansion plan.
So going forward, we'll end up being in almost 18 African countries. We still have a lot of projects which they are under the, this, but our capacity utilization will actually improve dramatically when we finish this. And some of you will ask that, okay, fine, how are we going to export the cement when there's a lot of congestion in Apapa, for example? As you are aware, we're building that road right from the port gate up to the toll gate. And I can assure you, this road will be completed even before the Lagos-Ibadan Express Road.
The chairman says the company is promoting a culture of performance and transparency to the benefits of the people, economies and communities it operates.
By next year, we will not only export 1 million as we normally do now. We are going to be a company that not only that will be serving the domestic market, but will be serving other African countries from Nigeria. Nigeria will have a capacity of about 8 million tons of export, and that will easily generate something like $700 million for us. And I believe $700 million will be about #1 outside oil and gas in terms of foreign exchange earning.
Thank you.
The company says through its strong corporate governance, it will continue to create long-term value for local and national economies that host the business.
The Nigerian equities markets got off to another negative start to the week, with the main index slipping below the 30,000 psychological level at the end of today's session. Here's Akaite Afia with today's figures.
Hello and welcome to the Stock Market Report. An unusual 2.69 billion shares traded on Wema Bank at the Nigerian Stock Exchange flagged off the new trading week, in which the all-share index fell below the 30,000 psychological level by 0.37%, and the total equity value softer at 13.19 trillion naira. In the banking sector, Wema Bank and Fidelity led the trading day in transactions turnover, followed by a 22.9 million shares on a small-cap industrial company, Thomas Wyatt. All in all, 2.86 billion shares worth 3.92 billion naira changed hands in 3,360 transactions. Looking at the sectoral chart, 5 main indexes closed in the green except for industrial goods, which was down by 0.5%, no thanks to a 1 naira 6 kobo drop in the share price of Dangote Cement. On the flip side, insurance stocks gained 0.49%, consumer goods advanced 0.38%, while oil and gas and banking added 0.3% and 0.16% each. Royal Exchange led the list of losers, while Prestige Assurance led the list of gainers. And that's the stock market report. I'm Ekaite Afia.
Thanks, Ekaite. Meanwhile, most of the global stock markets closed higher today as investors look out for developments later in the week from central banks in the United States and elsewhere. Let's see how some of the major markets performed today. And that's it on Business News. It's back to you, Ijeoma.
You First. First Bank.
Thanks a lot, BC. Let's get a wrap-up of the international stories. Here's Simon Pusey with Around the World in 5.
Good evening from the Channel's newsroom here in London. The ousted Egyptian president Mohamed Morsi has died after collapsing in court. That's according to state television. He was facing espionage charges when he reportedly fainted after a court session. He was the country's first democratically elected president in July 2012, but was overthrown in a military coup just a year later. He rose to power as the leader of the now banned Muslim Brotherhood, which is Egypt's largest Islamic group. He died at the age of 67. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has urged world powers to increase sanctions against Iran should it go over a uranium limit set by a 2015 nuclear deal. It's after a spokesman for the country's atomic energy organization told a news conference that Iran will breach the limit on the 27th of June. It's in protest at the United States' decision to pull out of the agreement and reimpose sanctions last year. Tensions are worsening following accusations by the US that Iran were behind 2 attacks on oil tankers in the Gulf of Oman last week.
Should Iran deliver on its current threats and violate the nuclear deal, the international community will have to implement immediately the preset sanctions mechanism, what is called snapback sanctions. In any event, Israel will not allow Iran to get nuclear weaponry.
Hong Kong's most prominent student activist Joshua Wong has called for the resignation of the territory's chief executive after walking free from prison. The 22-year-old became the face of the 2014 pro-democracy protests, which called for the city to pick its own leaders. He was arrested in May on contempt charges for his role in the so-called umbrella movement. His release comes as a political crisis in the city enters its second week. Organisers of Sunday's protests say almost 2 million people turned out to demand that Carrie Lam resign.
Now is the time for me to join this fight. It's time for us to urge Carrie Lam to withdraw the extradition law proposal, and it's her responsibility to step down and to face how 2 million people already joined the fight and urge her to bear the political responsibility.
Power has been restored to much of Argentina and Uruguay after a massive electrical failure left tens of millions of people in the dark. The blackout happened on Sunday morning, caused by a failure in an electrical grid that serves both Argentina and Uruguay. Parts of Paraguay and Chile were also affected. The outage occurred as people in Argentina were preparing to go to the polls for local elections, delaying voting in several regional provinces. Argentine President Mauricio Macri has promised a full investigation. 8 people have been killed after a dinghy carrying migrants sank off Turkey's western coast. Search and rescue operations were launched by the Coast Guard to reach the passengers of the boat, which sunk off the coast of the Bodrum district in the Mugla province. The rescue teams say 31 other people were rescued. Executives at Boeing have apologized for the loss of life in 2 crashes involving its 737 MAX planes. A combined 346 people died following crashes in Indonesia and Ethiopia that triggered one of the worst crises in the company's history. The worldwide grounding of Boeing's fast-selling aircraft followed. The company say they made a mistake in not communicating that a safety indicator in the 737 MAX planes didn't work and promised more transparency.
We are very sorry. Our thoughts and our prayers are with the loved ones of those who lost their lives.
Scientists believe they may have found a breakthrough in combating the spread of malaria, a disease which killed an estimated 435,000 people in 2017. Entomologists at the University of Maryland in America engineered the DNA of a type of fungus to deliver a toxin which kills malaria-carrying mosquitoes. After successful lab trials, the team headed to Burkina Faso, where scientists there produced and tested the toxin-infused fungus in a national research lab in Bobo Dioulasso and constructed a simulated village named Mosquito Sphere in nearby Somuso.
Out of the box, if they land anywhere on the outside of a mosquito, they'll recognize that they're on a mosquito and they'll burrow their way into the mosquito.
And finally, France's most famous orangutan has celebrated her 50th birthday. Named Ninette, she was given several edible presents, including a strawberry cake for the occasion. She is the oldest resident of the zoo, where the Borneo-born ape arrived as a 3-year-old in 1972. Orangutans are critically endangered in the wild, with the International Union for the Conservation of Nature estimating that there are only 100,000 remaining on the planet. And that's your international news around the world in 5.
Thanks a lot, Simon. Happy birthday to her, indeed. Still ahead on the news at 10, Nigeria's hopes of progressing at the FIFA Women's World Cup hangs in the balance after Super Falcons lose 1-0 to France. That's in a moment. Just stay with us.